Welcome to episode 61 of the Camerosity podcast, the world's #1 open source film photography podcast. My name is Mike Ekman, and it is time for another episode. For number 61, we're finally getting to a topic we've hinted at for the past 2 episodes. Everyone's favorite style of camera, the point and shoot. We hope to cover everything from the simplest, focus-free, fully automatic models to some of the more premium models with full manual modes, high-quality lenses, and all-metal bodies. Before we get started, though, let's do some introductions. From Yellow Springs, Ohio, Mr. Chocolate Pecan Pie himself, Paul Reibel. Hey, Paul, how much alcohol do you put in your pies?
A pint of bourbon. Oh no, you asked the pie. I was talking about the baker.
Ah. Next, from Sydney, Australia, Mr. Birthday Boy himself, Theo Panagopoulos. Hey, Theo, did you get any nice presents for your birthday?
I did. It coincides with Christmas, and my wife cashed in all our credit card points, and we ended up with a Nikon S2 on the way. So I think that's a pretty good birthday present.
Absolutely. Unfortunately, Anthony is not able to join us this week, but in the spirit of Anthony's love for underwater photography, I promised to talk about the Canon Aquasnappy ASX. As always, we have a waiting room full of eager listeners. Let's let them in. Right. I see Tim Peters is back. Welcome back, Tim.
Hey, Mike. How you going?
Awesome. It's great to have you last week listening to that episode. Sometimes when we do the live recording, I miss some of the things people say, but having gone through it again once the edited version's out, it was real fascinating hearing some of the things you were talking about.
Thanks. Yeah. I mean, that's my general experience with the Camerosity podcast in general. So
you listen to it more than once and you pick up on stuff that you missed. Yeah, that's a good point.
Oh, yeah. It's a savior in airport terminals. I'll say that.
Well, there was that one guy that said that he was listening to it while driving through the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. So
yeah, I know, because he's my best friend and he lives right upstairs. So
that's right. Okay.
I was in the car with him. I suggested to put it on in the first place, which is kind of funny.
Andrew Smith is back. Welcome back, Andrew.
How you doing?
As always, it's great to see Mark Faulkner. Mark, you've been away for quite a few episodes. Everything going okay?
Yep, doing all right. Good to be back on here.
Awesome. We have Rafael. Rafael, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Looks like you're a first-time caller.
First-time caller, long-time listener.
You want to introduce yourself? Tell us where you're from.
Rafael Espinosa, Denver, Colorado, and just somebody who got back into photography about 2012, so about 11 years in.
Very cool. Yeah. That was a good time to get in because it was still in the lull of people selling off their film stuff, and people were still pretty high on digital. And it's actually even before I got back into it. It was around 2014 when I jumped in, but prices were rock bottom. I've heard wild stories of around that time, people being able to pick up Leica screw mount bodies for under $100 and such like that. So I imagine there was some good deals to be had around then.
Yeah, my primary shooter is a Hasselblad 500C. Bought the whole kit with multiple backs and multiple lenses for $400.
Very cool. And AJ is back also from the last episode. His wonderful background, although I don't see the horseman anymore. So, oh, wait, there it is.
Good evening, gentlemen.
Matt Murray, welcome to the show, Matt.
Hello, thank you so much. I'm sorry about all the junk in the background. Had a problem with Zoom and didn't have time to tidy up, but great to be here.
That is absolutely not a reason to apologize. We encourage messy backgrounds. You want to introduce yourself real quick?
Yeah, sure. I'm Matt Murray from Matt Loves Cameras. I have a YouTube channel, which is film and a bit of digital. I sort of have a podcast, which I don't update very often, but that's all about film photography. And in reference to this episode, I am a point and shoot fanboy.
There's a lot of great point and shoots. I had mentioned to the guys we should come prepared with a couple small selection of models to talk about. And since I can't do anything to a small degree, I have a pile of about 13 or 14 models within arm's reach that maybe will come up, maybe they won't. But I talk too much in all these episodes, so I definitely don't want to do that again. I don't know. Let's kind of do what we did last week, and or I guess 2 weeks ago, and we'll go in order of how people appear on the screen. And Andrew Smith, maybe because your name begins with A, although AJ does too, so I don't really know how Zoom does it. But Andrew, what is your contribution to the wonderful world of point and shoots?
That's a good question. I think first I'd have to say, what do you define as a point and shoot?
That's actually a great question because, Paul, you asked that very question, right? What did we decide?
We decided Konica C35 forward. So it'd be like 1964.
But we're actually ignoring where point and shoot actually came from. And I came prepared. So
Oh,
what actually, where did point and shoot come from? It's where you point and you shoot, and someone else takes care of everything for you. So in reality, the initial point and shoots looked a bit like this, and I'm holding up a box camera for people that are listening because that was the original concept of point and shoot.
Because I had to do it. I have my 1888 Kodak, the replica. So you're right, though. That's actually that's a very valid point because that was Kodak. That was Eastman Kodak's. Gosh, I don't even think they were Eastman Kodak back then. They were, I think, still the Eastman Dry Plate Company when they first released that camera. But what was it? You push the trigger, we do the rest, or something like that. Wasn't that what their slogan was?
You press the button, we do the rest.
That's what it is. Yeah. And that's very true because that really was what they did. And in my opinion, that set the stage for Kodak throughout the whole rest of the 20th and even 21st century. While Kodak certainly did make some high spec models like the Medalist and the Ektra, an overwhelming majority of the cameras that bore the Kodak name were not necessarily cheap, but they didn't aim for the high end of the market. Kodak was
Brownie.
always the brownie. Exactly. They made millions of brownies from the original #2 brownie all the way to some of the Instamatic cameras of the 60s. Kodak's mission was primarily to sell film. And the reason that they made a majority of the cameras that they did was to have more customers to buy their film, right? The more people who had a Kodak camera, the more potential customers there were for film. And if you actually look at their history, many times whenever they released a new style of film, they would always have a new type of camera to do that. And in the 80s, they had the VR 35, which was when they released Kodacolor VR. They had new cameras for Pocket Instamatic. But while Theo is absolutely correct, we could go back and include things like the Kodak Brownies and all those stuff as point and shoot. This episode would become extraordinarily ungainly. But we did decide to try and do our best, at least kind of cap it to like the beginning of the full point and shoot automatic autofocus, mostly automatic. And I think that's the intent of what we're trying to do. The types of cameras that you can be an SLR shooter or a Leica shooter, but sometimes just having a camera that does absolutely everything for you at the ready in the glove box of your car, in a dark corner of your camera bag. I like to use the term zoo camera. I take the family to the zoo. This is the type of camera that while you're juggling juice boxes and pulling a wagon and trying to get in and out of all the little exhibits, you can't always have a folding rangefinder to take those candid moments. And that's where the point and shoots really come in and show their benefits. And there's so many that have great lenses that are capable of wonderful images. You just have to kind of use them to their strengths. So with that in mind, I'll go back to Andrew. Like what would you say? Like what or maybe let me ask you a more direct question then. Give me an example of a camera that either you bought on purpose, or maybe you found it, somebody gifted it to you, you found it at a garage sale. Maybe it was $1, whatever, you figured what the hell, but it actually really impressed you. Do you have anything like that?
So I have two. One definitely falls in that category, and I can't remember the exact designation, but it was a Ricoh. I think it was a 500 something, and it was like one from like the 90s that was fully automatic. It had like I think it had like one of those tele lenses where it would be like 45 or like 90.
TF 500.
Yeah, I think that was it. Yeah.
TF 500. It was an either or. It was not a zoom. It was an either or.
Yeah, exactly.
38 or 90, I think.
Yeah, somewhere along those lines. And I remember having that one and I liked it, but I dropped it, and it never had great autofocus, and the autofocus just stopped working and it was kind of unusable. But I really liked that camera for the year or so I had it, and it worked. I don't know if this one falls into the category, but I had a Canonet QL17 I really liked, and that does have kind of an automatic shutter, but it's not really full auto. So there we go. It's got a nice red one there.
Yeah, that's a point and shoot camera to me.
I would kind of consider it one because it does have the automatic features. You do have the manual focus, but it's still pretty user friendly and pretty easy.
Right. We won't get hung up on autofocus. The point and shoots can be fixed focus. They can be zone focus, or they can be manual focus. I mean, they're all valid cameras, or happy snaps. I mean, is what, or they used to call them point and pray rather than point and shoot. But that's an excellent choice. I mean, do you have one currently?
I don't. I think I ended up breaking both of those cameras, and I kind of went for more mechanical stuff after that because it's a little more resilient.
The G3s have had a resurgence over the last couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
And the prices on them are actually quite high, and they're really good cameras. Once you get past the fact that you really need to use the wean cell on them because they use the mercury battery. But the biggest issue with them is that the foam that is on the light seals and the back door is the most diabolical, nastiest foam, and it covers the entire track around the back door.
Rico had a lot of cameras that were like that too, where the entire door.
90% of the time, these things have completely deteriorated, and it's the worst job in the world to get off. I mean, you get the stuff all over you. But once you get one that's been changed, it's really a cool camera.
And you definitely want to replace the crumbling foam stuff. Even though, and I am guilty of it, I'll be Mr. Hypocrite here. I have shot a camera with a rotted light seal. I'll just take like electrical tape and tape it around the seam. But that's usually because I only need one roll of film out of it for the purpose of a review or something. But you really should replace that, not even just to protect it from light seals, but that stuff will fall off and get inside the camera. And, you know, we always talk about electronic cameras, or some of the point and shoots are susceptible to breakage. And once they break, they're not easy to get fixed. And while that is still true, sometimes a piece of foam getting stuck in some kind of motor or gear, or who knows what it could be, that can contribute to those cameras having an unnecessary failure. So when you do find a camera like the G3, like Paul was talking about, really resist the urge to use it too much without getting it replaced. There are kits you can buy online where the seals are pre-cut and ready to go. I've always found it much more economically feasible to just make my own. You can go to anywhere in the world, any arts and crafts, fabric store, hobby store, go to the fabric section, and they will almost certainly have adhesive backed black felt or even adhesive backed thin foam. I see Rafael's holding up, it looks like a kit. What are you holding there, Rafael?
A Nikon FA kit and a Nikon F90 kit.
And where did you get that?
Just online, but it's from US Camera. I think it was a Facebook page. I mean, eBay.
Yeah, US Camera has kits for all those things. You can also just buy, you know, as Mike says, they come in different thicknesses. I buy them from Hugo Studio. He sells an 8x10 inch sheet or 5x7 inch sheet of the backed foam in different thicknesses. And it's like $3 or something.
Yeah. And you can make 20 to 30 different, camera seal kits. In my experience, Paul mentioned the thickness of the material. That is far more important than the shape of it. You might think, oh, I don't know if I could cut it to that exact dimensions. Honestly, as long as it's roughly the same shape as the old stuff, I mean, unless you're a stickler for looking original OEM because you're going to enter it into some kind of camera show or something. If you're a user and you just want to use it, like when I cut my door seals, I just guesstimate. And as long as you're not gratuitously too big or too small, it's going to work fine. But getting the right thickness is definitely the most important, because you go too thick and sometimes the door won't close and then it doesn't seal at all. In the case of SLRs, which we're not talking SLRs, but SLRs have a mirror bumper that usually those kits, Rafael, yours probably has a mirror bumper in there. And while that doesn't have anything to do with light protection, it does help dampen the mirror. And if you don't get the right thickness material for that, that can cause issues with the mirror too. But definitely get the kits or the product made specifically for the right camera. Cut it to the right thickness. You could buy the pre-made kits, but to save money, especially if you're the kind of person that goes to a lot of different models, cutting your own isn't that much harder.
Just getting back onto the G3, the one thing that I actually find difficult with that particular camera is I believe it's actually shutter speed priority. And to me, that just feels counterintuitive from a point and shoot point of view. It just feels like it's the wrong way around for me. I know other people think otherwise, so I'm not going to say my way's right. I tend to think in aperture priority, which is why I'd probably lean towards the Electro. So when you talk about those G3s, you got to talk about the Yashica Electro series as well, because they're a point and shoot, which kind of sort of fall into the same mode. And then you start to look at the Olympus XA-E2s and XA3s and so on, which again are something that you just sort of put a rough estimate of what you're shooting, and then it takes care of the rest for you.
So I have a question along those lines. Would you consider a Mamiya 7 a point and shoot since it has the automatic shutter?
Look, a Mamiya 7 is the best camera in the world, so it can handle any category.
Did Theo pay you for that question?
No, I was wondering because I believe they also have the TTL light meter. I mean, not light meter, but flash metering as well.
Yeah.
And I think they're one of the only medium format cameras to have that.
Technically, it's a point and shoot camera, but I think it violates spirit of this discussion.
Never.
Because if we're gonna get into that, we're gonna get into the 6x9 GSWs. That is a rabbit hole bigger than us having a Zeiss Icon episode.
But there is a legit contender in there, and I just sold it, which is the GA 645 ZI.
Yeah, that's getting closer to a real point and shoot. Absolutely.
It's medium format. Yeah, I'd say I agree. That's a contender because there aren't too many medium format point and shoot. So
it's autofocus, auto exposure, had all the settings.
DX coded. Yeah, I mean, it does it all.
Not DX coded, but
wait, the Z was DX coded. The GA 645 wasn't. The Z and ZI or ZI2 was DX.
And isn't it true that only Fuji films had the DX? They didn't even call it DX coding. It was like Fuji's version of that, right?
Yeah, it was their coding.
Right. So Fuji created their own similar system to DX film like you see in 35 millimeter, but instead of it being on because there's no cassette, DX coding are those little silver squares on a 35 millimeter cassette. What Fuji did was they had a barcode that they printed on the leader of the paper on 120 film. And then there was an optical sensor inside the film compartment. Paul, you mentioned something. I understood what you meant, but maybe you could explain it for anybody listening who doesn't understand. You mentioned that Canonet, you really need the wine cell. Why is that important?
The voltage is slightly different on the battery. The original battery was a PX13, which was a mercury cell, and I believe it was 1.35. The current batteries are 1.5. So there would be the meter would be slightly off. I mean, I'm not saying that you'd even notice it, but it's possible. If you're shooting transparencies, it would be more of an issue. But with negatives or black and white or color negatives, you probably wouldn't see it. Their Wien cell is a zinc air battery, zinc air battery, and it is the correct voltage for the camera. The downside to them is they're relatively expensive. They don't last. So Matt, what about you? What's your Matt loves cameras? What's your point and shoot?
I'm Matt loves cameras, and I love point and shoots. I've sort of shot with all SLRs and stuff in the past. I've got a beautiful collection of cameras here. Probably my favorite is this one here, the Contax T3. It's got a beautiful Zeiss lens on it. This is the single tooth model. I actually bought what I thought was the double tooth. A seller in Japan said it was double tooth. It was single tooth. And guess what happened after about 3 rolls?
One of the teeth broke off.
Correct. So now to shoot with my, what cost $1,700 at the time, I use a $2 roll of masking tape. And when you put the film in, you've got to put a bit of masking tape between the film leader and the take-up spool for the camera to work, which is pretty crazy, but it actually worked. But in terms of actual images, like image quality, that is definitely my favorite. I've got another 10 here. I just don't know how long you want me to talk for, though.
What's the cheapest one you have?
The cheapest one, I've got loads of cheapies. I mean, if anyone ever wants a cheap point and shoot, though, I say you can't go past the Canon. The Canon made a fantastic range of point and shoots. This is not the cheapest, by the way. I mean, I've got the Owl here. Oh, no, sorry, the Sure Shot AF7, which was also called the Owl because it's got this ginormous viewfinder, which is, I think it's the same viewfinder here as the Prima AS1, the waterproof one. Canon point and shoots generally from the 90s and early 2000s, they're all great. I mean, I don't think they ever made a real premium point and shoot Canon, but Canon point and shoots, if you want a cheap and cheerful one, you can't go past them.
Excellent. I agree. Those are both good choices.
Matt, how is it that your Canon is not yellow?
Which Canon?
That all-weather rugged one, the tough.
Oh, this one?
Whatever yeah, mine's very yellowed.
Oh, really?
The Minoltas were yellow. The Canons were always the
Canons. Yeah, gray, red. Yeah.
Oh, the Aqua Snappy.
Yep.
Well, the follow-up to the Aqua Snappy was called the A1, I think, right? And that was white.
Yes. The Aqua Snappy was that one, the one Mike's holding up. Was that an AS6?
Yeah, AS6. This was the first one, and then the A1 came after this one.
And there was another one that was weather resistant, but not waterproof.
Yeah, so there's another one that looks like this is the Prima AS1, which is I think it also sold as a Sure Shot A1 in North America, and there was a follow-up one to this which actually had more red here called the WP1, and instead of there being
that was waterproof.
Yeah, it was waterproof, but you couldn't really put it underwater. And the key thing to notice there is on the dial here, you can't see, but there's a little fish there on the dial. On the one with the red there's a flower on there. So that's a bit of an indicator, shoot flowers, not fish with that one.
And I've used this underwater too. I mean, I wasn't scuba diving, but I took it to a water park with my family. So I went down water slides with it, swam in a pool, so I probably never went more than 2 feet underwater. But the results are really quite good. This is a 5-element lens. The one thing you have to be aware of, and this applies to any underwater camera, not just this one, but the focus range does change when you're underwater. Like you cannot focus this to infinity underwater.
Hence the fish mode.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm with Matt on that one. I've got I think it's the A1, and I use it underwater, and it is a hell of a lot of fun. It's a lot easier than bringing the Nikonos down because you basically just you literally point and shoot. But one thing people don't realize with those A1s is they are extremely good above water as well. Those lenses are actually really, really good. I use it as a normal compact, and it's just a lot of fun because it's easy and you get really good results out of them.
Nikon's equivalent was the Action Touch. It was only good down to like 4 feet or 5 feet.
It was a follow-up to this, wasn't it? The L35.
Yeah, the Action Touch was twice the weight. It was just a much bigger camera. But yes, it was the follow-up. Which one is that, Rafael? Is that the WP or the A1?
It's the A1, but mine's decidedly grayer as the plastic is aged and weathered. So that's why I just thought they all were sort of this weird cream color.
Mine's kind of cream, probably just the light.
We get less ozone protection here, so it kind of stays whiter, I suppose.
But this Prima AS1, or the A1 as it's called in North America, that was used by Fred Herzog, the Canadian photographer. I think he used a lot of Leicas, but then he switched to one of these at some stage. I think it was because I read, I hope this is correct, but I think he read that when he was shooting with it, people just thought it was a toy and didn't take him very seriously.
Now, Matt, one camera that I'm interested in seeing you pulling out is your Fuji. Is it Tiara or is it?
I don't have a Tiara. I've got the Natura though.
The Natura. That's it.
Natura. This is the one. I took this to Sydney last year, and everyone around the table was like, "Wow, what is this?" So this is the Fujifilm Natura f1.9. It's got a lovely sort of early 2000s screen on the back, which is either green or orange. And the thing about this is it's got one of the fastest lenses ever for point and shoot f1.9. You can't shoot in aperture priority. However, if you do load ISO 1600 film or faster, it will shoot at f1.9 automatically. So that's the only way you can shoot wide open with this camera. But yeah, I love this camera. I love shooting with fast film at dusk at nighttime with this.
Am I remembering correctly? Doesn't that camera have a mode that only works when you use Natura 1600 film?
It's basically, with this model, it's ISO 1600 or more. It's called natural photo mode. Now, if you have the zoom model, which is the Fujifilm Natura Classica, it works from 800 speed and up. But with this fixed lens one, it's 1600 and up, and it's called natural photo mode. There's a lot of, I think, misinformation about it. People think that it does add some exposure compensation to the images when you shoot in natural photo mode. If you look at one of the manuals though, and you translate it from Japanese to English automatically, because I don't read Japanese, it does say in there it adds up to 2 stops exposure compensation when you shoot at f1.9. But a lot of people will just say, oh, it adds 2 stops exposure compensation like automatically, but the Japanese manual I translated said it kind of assesses the scene and it can add up to 2 stops. And in my tests shooting with natural photo mode and not natural photo mode, there wasn't really that much difference. So I think it just depends on the scene.
Now, you had mentioned one of the fastest lenses. Now, Canon, what was that Canon model, Paul, that had the 1.9 lens?
1.9. Okay.
Is that okay? He's got one right there too, Matt.
AF 35 ml.
Yeah, the Sure Shot.
Yep.
Now that one I do have, and one thing two things I don't like about it. One, it offers no manual. Theo's got one too. But in addition to it not having manual control, there's no way to force the camera to open all the way. other than if it just happens to find that right combination, whatever programmed auto exposure is in the camera. And you have no way of knowing if it's even doing it either. So it sounds cool, at least on that specific camera, to see this big, beautiful piece of blue coated glass on the front of a point and shoot. It's certainly stunning looking. I like having mine to sit on a shelf, but it's not as practical as you think. If it otherwise functions like any other auto shot from that era, it's just maybe under the right circumstances in a dingy bar with the light reflecting the right way, maybe you might get it to shoot at 1.9, but even if it did, you would never know.
Well, the other thing I really never, the Sure Shots were revolutionary. They were like the AE1 because they were in a lot of households and they took a lot of family pictures. The thing I didn't like was it was noisy. That is the loudest motor. It was one of the first that had the built-in film advance, and the film advance on it was very loud.
Mind you, it's not as loud. I have shown this one before, so I'll only do it for a brief second. The Practi. It's not allowed. Yeah. The Practi, one of the first effective point and shoots.
That one's like construction equipment grinding rock while it's advancing film.
East Germany's answer to a discrete, easy to use point and shoot.
Now, a good tip that I think most, if not all, early autofocus cameras had, knowing that the film advance was very noisy. On most of them, if let's say you were in a situation where you wanted to be a little bit quieter, you can press the shutter release and hold it down and keep your finger on the shutter release. The exposure will be made fine. So by holding down the shutter release, you're not ruining your exposure, but by keeping your finger on the shutter release prevents it from advancing the film. And then you can like take the camera, stick it in your pocket or under your coat or something, and then let your finger off the button and then it'll advance. Doesn't completely make it go away, but it is an option you have to make it a little bit more discreet where you can kind of hide the noise it's going to make when it goes to the next frame. What do you got there, Paul?
At a certain point, the manufacturers decided they needed to put zoom lenses on the camera. So you get that go out. This is actually a 38 to 105. But some of the manufacturers like Olympus that really specialized in these cameras came up with some special models. This one is covered in burgundy leather, LT 105. So it's a 38 to 105 zoom. And it has the little, when you turn it off, the lens retracts, and then you've got a snap-on lens cap.
That's cool. It's pretty. So we've covered some of the fastest lensed point and shoots. That Fuji Natura is one that I'd really like to try, but prices on it are quite high.
Mike, what was that funny little Fuji that had the two lens, the lens that rotated? You happen to have one there?
It's one of the ones I set aside. It's the TW3. So what's cool about this is it's kind of like that Rico that Andrew was talking about at the beginning, where you have two choices of focal length. You have wide, which is 23 millimeter. Oh, it's a half frame camera too, by the way. The wide is 23 millimeter. And the tele is 69 millimeter. So, again, you have to adjust that for half frame versus full frame. But you switch by rotating a ring around the front. Now, ironically, that doesn't move the lens. The lenses themselves stay in the exact same location. But what's really weird, and there's no way I'll be able to show this, you just got to check out my review for this camera. When you switch between wide and tele, in wide mode, the back of the lens is lined up straight with the film plane. So you take your picture through the wide angle lens, light passes through the lens, through the shutter, hits your film plane, exposes your film. But when you switch it to tele mode, there's actually a reflex mirror that moves into place, and it redirects the light from the tele lens, which is not in front of the film plane, and the light kind of bounces through the mirror to go from the tele lens to the wide angle lens. A couple things about this camera. It's very small. It's almost like almost a perfect square. Having the two focal lengths is pretty neat. Two things about it though. It's one of those cameras that came out at the dawn of the lithium battery era. So Fuji put in a soldered, non-user replaceable battery in here. You can replace it. You just got to open the camera up and know how to desolder, find the right replacement and solder it back in, which I did do. It's not that hard to do. I do have instructions on how to do it on my site, because pretty much any one of these you're going to find today, there's no way that original battery has a charge left on it. But the other thing, and that sort of a penalty, I guess, for having the dual focal lengths is it resulted in a viewfinder that's incredibly tiny. If you can picture a 1940s, early 50s Kodak Retina, where the viewfinder is slightly larger than a piece of rice, I would say this is bigger than a Retina's viewfinder, but not by much. So for a camera from the mid, I think this came out in 88, maybe. I can't remember. I'm talking about my own review and I don't remember what it is. Yeah, okay. So Tim Peters is holding up a Retina and the viewfinder on the back of it is about the same size as on this Fuji. So it is quite painful to use when shooting. And in my opinion, that's kind of what destroys it. I actually wished, so this is called the TW3, and it was the only model in this series they made. I really would have loved it if maybe they had a TW1 model that omitted the tele lens and was only the wide angle and had maybe a larger straight through viewfinder. Had they been able to do that, but in the same form factor, half frame, it's also vertically traveling half frame too. And what that means is that because the film transports up and down instead of side to side, in half frame, the natural orientation of the camera is landscape. Whereas like an Olympus pen or most half frame cameras, the natural orientation is portrait. I find these vertically traveling half frame cameras to be great users. And I do like the ergonomics of it. I love the size, but a combination of anytime you find one, having to open it up and solder in a new battery, and then even after you do that, there's a very, very small viewfinder, somewhat ruins, or at least in my opinion, mostly ruins the usability of it.
Well, speaking of batteries, I mean, the compact manufacturers were trying all sorts of things. One of the cameras I've come up with recently is the Canon Del Sol, which is the camera that you actually has a solar panel on it, so you could actually charge it up with a solar panel. I unfortunately got it in the other room at the moment because I've got it near a window trying to charge it up. I have a suspicion I might have to change the rechargeable battery in it. It holds a charge for about 2 shots and then sort of dies. They were trying all sorts of things. I mean, the Del Sol, though, is a really weird one, though, because if you think about it, you're actually putting it in the sunlight so you can actually charge it up while you've got your film in the camera, which we know how that works.
Canon thought of that to some degree, and I don't know if you know this, Theo, but there is actually an overheat protection that camera has where the screen will actually pop up automatically and separate itself from the rest of the camera to allow ventilation to kind of get, I don't know how effective it is, but that was sort of like their acknowledgement of, hey, we created a camera that needs to be placed in direct sunlight to be powered. But what happens if it bakes in the Sydney sun?
I actually came across that because I actually did put it outside yesterday and I had to go pick up my car. And halfway there, I rang up my son and said, hey, can you go grab the camera from outside? Because it is like 30 degrees plus here today. And I started having visions of the plastic melting and stuff like that because the sun was just brutal. So yeah, it's a really weird one in that sense.
Now, Paul, you recently had one, right? Did you get a chance to play with it?
I did. And it actually took a charge for about 20 shots. I sold it a few days ago. And I pointed the guy on your website in your review. You have detailed instructions on how to replace those batteries, which I use to sell it.
Which I'll be following.
Yeah, it's just like the Fuji I mentioned. You have to open it up and desolder. There was one additional step, and I'm going off memory here because I did this like 4 years ago, but there was actually a bracket that's soldered onto the original battery that you need to actually connect the new battery to the camera. So you have to desolder this bracket off of the original battery and then reuse it. Or, if you have a machine lathe, or something, maybe you could fabricate something new. Wink, wink, Tim. You do need to reuse one of the parts off of the original battery. But what's funny is, and I can't remember the model. Again, it's in my article, but the battery you need to buy is the exact same kind used in like a Braun rechargeable razor or something. So whatever kind of, I think back when these cameras are first being made, now the Fuji is a lithium non-rechargeable battery. So when that thing dies, it's dead. But at least the Canon's was meant to be recharged. And that camera came out in the 90s. So like you've seen, Theo and Paul, there is at least hope that you can find one of those and they may still hold a small amount of charge and still be usable. But if you do end up replacing yours, which is what I did, I have it on the top shelf, so I don't want to dig it out. But I actually saw it not too long ago and it still looked fully charged from the last time I used it. So you replace that battery and it'll hold a charge for quite a while.
And I've seen some results for the photos taken with that camera just recently here in Australia, actually, and they are very nice.
It's back to the auto shot Canons. Even their cheapest auto point and shoot auto shots generally had pretty good optics. So, the solar panel is a little gimmicky. It looks cool. I mean, don't get me wrong. That is a camera that I have no problem recommending to people just to put on a shelf. If you want to use it, great. But once you get past the solar panel part of it, it's just a fairly normal Canon auto shot from that era, which is a compliment. Those cameras were very nice.
Yeah, which sort of leads us into the discussion of the zoom ones. I think, Paul, you mentioned the zooms earlier, but it's not all about the fast lenses and the premium copies. I mean, there were just millions upon millions of these compacts made. Nikon had their, there it is in front of me, a light touch. These things, I mean, this is like a 38 to 140 zoom, pretty slow in terms of lens, but the quality you got, the advancements they made in the lens technology at that point are pretty amazing because I must admit, I love using it. It's convenient. You just stick this flash on if it's a bit low and light, and the results, you still capture your memories.
The first dual lens cameras were in either or, and generally they were a 35 or 70 or a 35 or 80. And then they came out with what they call zooms, but they weren't really truly zooms. If you measure them, you can't stop them where you want to. They're going to have probably like a 35 to 105 or 38 to 105 would actually have 4 or 5 positions where you could stop it within that 38 to 105 range. You couldn't stop it at 52 millimeters. You had to stop it. It stopped where it wanted whenever you let off the button, but you couldn't really get a true zoom type capability.
Well, and they used the wide depth of field. Usually a camera like that, a lot of times the early ones had 38 or 35 millimeter lenses, so they already had a natural wide depth of field, but then they were usually pretty slow too. A lot of the earlier zoom cameras had like f4, f4.5 lenses, which also maximized it.
So do you think they learned a lot from the Olympus XA series, where that was the start of these lenses which were small and wide and could capture everything, and advanced based on that? Mark Faulkner's got one there at the moment.
Well, the problem became that the autofocus systems themselves had to improve in order to be able to get the telephoto zooms. They started out with one type system, then they went to a contrast detection. And that worked fine until you get into low light, and then you had slow lenses. So as autofocus technology became better, the ability to have longer lenses became a lot easier. And then you reach the ultimate when you got into the Olympus IS series, the bridge cameras that had zooms out to 200 millimeters. And they were excellent. I mean, the lens quality and really good.
I just pushed out a review of the IS2. For my money, honestly, if you find someone who wants to get into film photography and they're new and they want like a point and shoot camera, but maybe they're more familiar with like a DSLR, they want a through the lens type camera, the Olympus IS series, all of them. I had the 2. A lot of people told me the 3 is even better. It has a wider range of zoom. The autofocus is faster. It's a fantastic camera, and it has a really good and very usable macro mode, which for a camera that's meant for basically consumers, a consumer SLR fixed lens, so you can't change the lens at all. It is technically a bridge camera, so the shape of the camera is a little odd. The way that the film loads into it and transports, I think, is kind of strange. But it's one of those cameras that you can truly just give to someone that knows nothing about photography, put it in program mode, and they're going to get 24 out of 24 good shots from it.
Yeah, and Olympus supported it. I mean, they made all kinds of really amazing accessories for that, a complete flash system.
The built-in flash is one of the best pop-up flashes I've ever seen.
It's very good.
There's actually 2 bulbs. there's two separate bulbs. So when you pop up the flash on it, again, I have a picture on my site, but it's like a stepped flash that allows it to work at both far away and close up. You can use the flash in macro mode and it won't overpower what you're taking a picture of.
Yeah, that's an excellent choice, Mike. And the thing is too, they're dirt cheap.
Yep.
They're basically nothing but peanuts. I mean, they're $49 for a good condition.
Yeah.
IS2 or IS3.
Are they a point and shoot?
It's an SLR point and shoot, but I would defend that it's being a point and shoot camera because it truly is. You can shoot it in full manual mode. The one caveat I would say is if you go on eBay and you're thinking of picking one up, some of the later models were made for APS film, so you're going to want to avoid those. But any of the 35 millimeter, they had the IS-123. It's one of those cameras where outside of North America, they had a different name. So that kind of gets a little confusing. And then they had, correct me if I'm wrong, wasn't there like a 100, 200, 300?
Yeah, 30, 20, 30, and a 200. Yeah.
The whole series gets a little confusing. The single digit 1, 2, and 3, I agree with you, Paul. The prices on them have not begun to escalate like certain cameras have, and I really, really like the shots I got from mine.
Should we all go buy a whole bunch of them now to preempt the?
Well, it's funny because I bought mine as a result of someone on this show talking about it. It was one of our earlier episodes. Somebody came on and was raving about them.
Stephen Dowling.
It could have been. And Theo, you got me to buy the Hey King Helena one, but then I also got the Olympus IS3, and in the last episode I talked about getting the Yashica YF. So I fall prey to this show's gas. We are not immune. Real quick, somebody mentioned earlier that Canon never really got into the premium point and shoots. And while I'll agree that's true, they did have this one model that was clearly inspired by the Olympus XA series. It was called the Canon MC. It's a very compact, this one's autofocus though, but it's got that kind of clamshell design where the power switch is a sliding door that you open and close. And that'll power the camera on. And then you could have a detachable flash that screws onto the side. So this was, I think, a little bit more expensive. Anytime you make something smaller, it somewhat adds to the cost of it. Looks like, Matt, you have one too.
Yeah, I think this is a later one. This is the Sure Shot Sleek.
Okay.
So there's two different models of this one, and this one's got a similar kind of the nice little button there, it opens up, and it's a nice little camera. It's got an f 3.5 lens, but again, I think this is about as premium as these two. The smaller ones are about as premium as Canon ever got.
And I don't mean to rip on Canon because I do like a lot of their models, but one thing they, in my opinion, have never done well is from the design standpoint, you can't look at a Canon and tell that's a better Canon. A lot of other companies usually, like, they would do something like a better material, or they would give it a neater, something to differentiate a premium Nikon from a consumer grade Nikon. But like, especially in the EOS series, like, they all looked the same to me. From 5 feet away behind the counter at Paul's camera shop, if there was a lineup of Canon SLRs and point and shoots, it would not be easy to identify which ones are the better models over the cheaper ones. And I don't know that really hurt them by any means, because clearly Canon's done well for themselves, but just kind of an observation that it's not always obvious which Canons are premium.
And then it reached the point where late in the 35 millimeter point and shoot game, which would have been just before APS came out, the Koreans started making cameras, and the quality and the styles and everything that they made. The Samsung AF Slim. Matt, do you have one of those in your collection? An AF Slim?
I don't know.
Okay, it's a tiny little thing. It's smaller probably than an XA, but it's squared off. It's a rectangle, of course, but very tiny camera. They made them in different colors, including a one that was an off-white. It was just a beautiful little camera, and the quality was really, really good. And of course, they made the Rollei Prego camera.
Well, Samsung owned Rollei from, I think, 96 to 99.
Right, and they had Schneider lenses.
Right. They didn't own Schneider. The relationship was a bit confusing, but Samsung owned Rollei. But then Rollei had some kind of agreement, a partnership, where they were able to use Schneider lenses. So you can get that the Slim that Paul's talking about. They made one SLR called the SR4000 that also came with Schneider lenses, but that was a short-lived period of Samsung's camera making history.
Konica also had some nice cameras. The little the BM 210, I believe. I actually have one. I bought one for my mother-in-law. That's a nice little camera. Matt's holding one up there.
Yeah, the big minis. It's just nice.
Big minis.
It's just a beautiful little camera. It's like so smooth and rounded edges, and it takes really good images. Again, Konica never brought out one where you could choose the aperture, but still lovely cameras.
Is it a 28 millimeter wide on that, Matt?
It is. Oh gosh, it's a 35 f3.5.
Mike is holding up a Hexar.
The Hexar. So you can choose you can choose the aperture on this one. The dial right on top has the numbers on it. This is the optional flash that it came with.
Kyle has one as well.
Yeah, I got one too. So yeah, here's silver one.
The shutter speed's pretty slow, isn't it? 1/250th is the top shutter speed. Is that right?
Yeah, that is without a doubt the biggest weakness of this camera is that it tops out at 1/250, which is a shame because otherwise it's got an f2 35 millimeter lens. I think 6 element, might be 7. I can't remember. The viewfinder is very good. It displays the focus distance in there. Kyle, have you shot your Hexar?
Sure.
Describe the sound it makes when you fire the shutter.
Yeah, I'm trying.
Well, you can't hear it. That's what I'm getting at.
Yeah, super quiet.
Some of the models had silent mode, which was a hidden feature.
This one has that feature, but even with it off, it's still one of the quietest shutters you can't tell it's firing. Like they almost need to like give it a beep or something, like beep. There should be an audio confirmation mode that the shutter actually fired, because when you're so used to hearing some kind of noise, this thing is quiet.
Is that a rangefinder? I know there was the RF and the AF, but is that AF one? Is that an automatic rangefinder?
No, there's no rangefinder now. This is
Okay.
a true point and shoot.
Okay,
There
cool.
was a rangefinder model,
Yeah.
which was gratuitously more expensive, but Paul, not any better.
Oh, it was like a mount. I mean,
That's right.
It was a totally different camera. It was like
That's right.
Yeah, it was, that one was a really good camera too. But the Hexar that to me is the best. I actually had one of those. I was a Konica dealer, and before they brought those into the US, for some reason or other, they sent us one, and I latched onto it, and I carried it in my briefcase and shot with it for probably 15 years. It was just a wonderful camera.
Now, if the Konica Hexar is their best ever point and shoot, for anybody who knows me, what is the worst Konica point and shoot?
The A-Borg.
The AI Borg. That thing is an absolute abomination. It looks weird, and I think that's what appeals to some people. That's what attracted me to it. I've frequently talked about my gripes with that camera, so I won't repeat it too much here. For a company that was able to do the Hexar, which is so wonderful, plus, I mean, Konica made plenty of really cool cameras. That AI Borg was just complete stinker.
Since you're on Konica, though, can I throw in my contribution, which is,
Yeah, go ahead.
are these guys?
The Kintabakus.
Yeah, these are great. I mean, as point and shoot, right? You're not going to control aperture or anything, but I do love the tactile feedback, sort of be able to use the camera without looking at it. And, you can carry it around any environment and not really worry about what happens to it.
It's a construction camera. In Japan, they were called I can't say it, Kintabaku.
Genba Kantoku.
It's Genba Kentoku.
Yes, and they're construction cameras. They're made to take out on job sites and take pictures. And I agree. I love those cameras. They're very industrial looking, but the quality is excellent.
Fuji made a series of them. I remember, completely off topic, but I used to have a part-time job working for Best Buy, and I remember Panasonic had a series of job site laptops that were similar. They were like 4 inches thick, full of like armor and rubber corners and such like that. So that clearly was a niche for a while. There was job site, rugged. You can't scuba dive with them, but I mean they could handle getting rained on or splashed or something like that. So very, very cool cameras. And them being Konicas and Fujis and such, you're gonna have decent lenses. So when they're clean, they're gonna make some really nice photos as well.
I'm an architect by trade, and my thought was that they probably wouldn't slump on go chintzy on the glass, because some of this documentation on the job site is probably used in litigation.
Yeah, they got to be good. AJ, we haven't heard from you. So, Mr. 5x7 field camera, what kind of point and shoots do you have for us? That
I've actually have there's a few here I inherited from family members. I think it was Theo who held up a brownie. I've got a Hawkeye.
there you go.
All right, from my mentor, my Uncle Bob.
Have you flipped the lens on it?
Not yet. I do have 620 rolls behind me that I have to re-spool some 120 on to try it out. He used it recently in the last year, and he said it was working fine. How about the we're talking about Canon Sure Shots. I've got one here that I inherited from my grandfather a few years back.
Which one is that?
This is the Sure Shot Telly. I don't know what. Well, no, wait a minute. Hold on. I do know. It has a 40-70 zoom. So, and it has a soft filter on it.
That's cool.
It is an absolutely brilliant camera, and it also does multiple exposures. So
Yeah.
if you want a point and shoot that does multi exposures, this is your beast. It's a great camera.
Oh, is that what that is? I thought that was memory exposure. Okay.
Yeah, so I've actually done double exposures with this camera, same camera you got. It's called the Sure Shot Telly, also known as the Top Twin. The Sure Shot Telly shouldn't be confused with the half frame one, which is the multi telly. This is the Sure Shot Telly we've got here.
Okay.
But it's a great camera. Yeah, I've done loads of double exposures with it, but I understand you can just hold the button in and just do like, triple, quadruple exposures if you want. It's a really great. It's very clunky, but it's a great camera.
So I still have to try that one out.
Matt, can you explain real quick the multi-telly? It does half frame and full frame?
It does. So the multi-telly is one that has been feted, celebrated by many people in the film photography community. It's a Canon point and shoot. I've got one up there with a busted battery door I haven't got with me, but there's a little thing when you open up the back to put the film in. There's a little yellow button, and you can slide it across to either shoot the whole roll with half frame or the whole roll with full frame. You can't obviously, get into the back of the camera halfway through a roll and decide you want to shoot half frame from then on. It's actually got two lenses as well. This is one thing people don't talk about. It's got the two Canon lenses. It switches between a standard and a more telephoto lens. However, a lot of people love it and go on about it. I've got one and I've never really gelled with it for some reason. I'm not sure why.
Literally just close the slides to go get the half frame then.
It's actually a weird camera. Yeah, you sort of choose your half frame or your full frame when you put the film in. And the other weird thing about that camera, which I haven't mentioned, this is the multi-telly, the half frame one. It actually, the lens cover is always closed except for when it's taking the picture. It's the most bizarre thing. So the lens only ever pops out like a cuckoo clock when it's taking the picture, then it goes back in and hides. It's really it's cute and weird, but yeah, it's bizarre.
I can imagine those plastic gears don't hold up after decades.
Well, it's actually the battery door for me. I've got a gaffer tape mine shut, which is a real pain. It still works. It's just the battery door, like some of the early Canons.
I've also got a Nikon L35AF.
That's a good one.
Over here. This is my uncle's favorite. I've got it now for a while to kind of store for him.
It's one of my favorite compacts, AJ. Especially yours looks like it's the early one with the sonar lens. They are very, very good.
The first version had a sonar. The other two did not. To be fair, though, I have the third version. It was called the Nikon One Touch, I think AF3, which is just a 4-element, but the images were great. I don't feel like I'm missing by not having the sonar, but your point though, Theo, that the sonar one is definitely more desirable.
The other one went to ASA 1000.
That's this one here.
Yep, those were the highest end.
Yeah, I just checked it before, and it's an f2.8 35 millimeter. It's a fantastically beautiful little camera, portable. More recently, newer, I also have my first half frame camera, which is just a Kodak Ektar H35. This one here, I also let the kids use.
We had someone talk about that in a previous episode, and turns out that thing's nicer than it looks.
Yeah. I'm pretty impressed with it. I mean, for something as small and simple, it has its own automatic flash, which runs on a AAA battery. I mean, for just snapping, somebody was talking about leaving a camera in the car. I mean, that's one of them. I've got a couple of the Harman Instamatics that I got for each of the younger of my kids to start them off on film photography. And I also have obviously a sprocket rocket. Would that be considered a point and shoot?
Sure, why not?
Yeah, why not?
I see Raphael's face there.
We got to limit it somewhere.
So AJ, so let me understand this, AJ. You want to get your kids into film photography, but you're not putting them straight onto 5x7.
Not yet. Although believe me, they're every time I take it out, they're always chasing me down trying to that's a little bit more sensitive. But my son's gotten pretty good with macro photography now for his Legos.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. He shoots a lot of his Lego setups after he's done each of the kits.
Okay, I gotta segue. Sorry to interrupt. You said macro. We're talking point and shoots and macro. There's the GoCo Macro Max.
I have one of those new in the box, Mike, if you need another one.
No, I have one in the box too. It's still it's in the crypt.
Yeah, two. I found one today and wondered about it because I don't remember that camera.
Now they made GoCo they are a Japanese company. My understanding is that they initially started off trying to appeal to emerging markets. So a lot of these cameras were sold in India. They were marketed in China. They did eventually make it out west to Europe and to North America. But a majority of GoCo, it's GOKO. A majority of their cameras have a macro mode, and there's 3 modes. So it's a zone focus camera. You can see on the front, there's a red, yellow, and green range. So you move the slider and it moves the lens between the 3 ranges. N, which is green, is anywhere from 3.3 meters to infinity. So roughly 10 feet to infinity. Yellow is anywhere from 1 meter to 3.3 meters. And then red is 1 meter to 0.3 meters. And while you can use the camera in any of the 3 modes, in the closest mode, when you bought the camera new, it came with a little thing that attaches to the bottom, and it's basically a wireframe. And what the wireframe does is it extends to the exact focal point at what you're focusing on, and it also frames it out. So if I had a picture of a flower or something I wanted to take a macro picture of, you just hold the camera and you don't even need to look at the viewfinder. You just line up the frame that's protruding out of the front of the camera, and then you just press the shutter release, and it'll be perfectly in focus. The flash is coupled to the focus distance, so it'll give you properly exposed In fact, I don't even think you can turn the flash off in the close modes. I could be wrong on that, but I remember there being a trick with the flash on this camera. This thing is light. I mean, it is pure plastic. It looks cheap. It feels gimmicky, but holy cow, it works really well. I mean, no, it's not going to recreate, a Nikkor 55 millimeter micro Nikkor lens, a proper macro setup. But for a point and shoot camera that does macro photography up to 0.3 meters away, which is like 10, 11 inches for a point and shoot, it works incredibly well.
And you can use that flash too?
Yeah. So otherwise it's a point and shoot camera. I mean, in the green mode, I mean, it's a slow lens. I think it's like a 5.6. I can't even remember, but in good lighting, it takes decent pictures. It's probably a basic triplet or something like that. I can see the purple lens coating on it. It's fixed focus. I mean, not fixed, but once you move it to green, you can't change it. For a basic point and shoot for a kid, it'd be great. But if you want to teach would you say your son for shooting Legos? If for whatever reason you wanted your child to be shooting macro on film, this would be the camera to get. Or if you just want to play with macro on a point and shoot, check out a GoCo Macro Max.
Fantastic. Definitely. Christmas is coming.
Paul's going to have one for sale pretty soon.
Yeah. Well, I was that was one of the 2 weirdest cameras I got from Kurt.
Really?
The other one was an Agfa Optima sensor flash, which is a zone focus camera that has a manual film advance, thumb advance, and it's the weirdest thing I've seen. What happens is when you load the camera, the full roll is on the right side of the camera as you're looking at it. The full roll is under the film advance. The leader pulls out to the other side and goes into a little hidden trap that's in there, and it advances that way. There is no rewind knob. There's a weird button that's hidden under the flash that you push down and turn, and use the film advance at that point to rewind the film back into the cassette.
So the film advance both goes forward and backwards, but the same motion.
Yeah, and it actually works. But, it's such a goofy little camera. It uses, I think, 2 AAA batteries, and that's just for the flash and the exposure meter. I thought they were just nonsense. I mean, they're going to be, a stupid little camera. They sell for a couple $100 because some influencer on the internet has decided it's the best camera that he's ever owned. So he has single-handedly increased the value of the camera about 10 times what it's actually worth.
I would definitely take advantage of that and get rid of it as soon as you can.
I did. It didn't work. And it worked great, except the film counter didn't work.
I just did an internet search on the macro max, and whose article was the top?
Probably because it's probably the only one. I remember when I got that camera, just trying to find any information on it. Because remember, like I said, GoCo did not market much in the United States. I think I found one reference for it in like the back of Good Housekeeping magazine or something referencing it. So
GoCo made was video transfer system.
yeah, they did a lot of other things besides cameras.
Their optics were in the video transfer systems to transfer 8mm movies to video. That was their whole thing.
Tim, what do you got for us?
Well, I have to confess, I haven't had the best luck in the past with point and shoots. For example, the first one I attempted to use was a Konica Mr. 70 that my mom actually won on the Wheel of Fortune in 1985. What a weird camera. It has a two-position focus, two-position lens, not focus, like we were talking about earlier. But there's this bizarre mechanism where the front like group moves out of the camera, like telescopes out, and then the rear group actually just kind of slots down. It's kind of strange. It's on a pivot inside the camera, pretty overcomplicated. But the thing is, with these Mr. 70s, they're kind of made like a Kinder Egg toy, kind of. They fall apart. So mine just screams at you when you try and press the shutter button and flashes its light and kind of sounds like it's dying because, quite frankly, it is. But that being said, although I haven't had the most luck with electronic point and shoots, I have a few here that I would consider point and shoots, but they're kind of more mechanical. First, we kind of talked about it earlier, the Olympus Pen. This is kind of one of the first modern point and shoots. This is the Pen S. This one's from circa 1960, if I remember correctly. This works amazingly. The shutter in it is a whisper, and the lens on it's pretty good. If you haven't really tried a pen, Olympus pen, you should really try one. They're really cute. Like they're absolutely tiny. You could put this in your front pocket all day long, wouldn't feel a thing. So, I mean, not much else to say about this. It's kind of a self-describing camera. But the one I really want to show, because this is a very controversial camera, the Nikon EM. Most people would look at this and go, it's not a point and shoot. I would say, yes, it is. There's no manual exposure on this beyond the M90, the mechanical 90 backup on this. I have the motor drive mounted. I'll take that off. But it is always in aperture priority mode when it's on. There's just two modes: on, which is aperture priority, and off, which is M90 or bulb. But paired with its stock, its kit 50mm Series E Nikkor, well, not Nikkor, Nikon. It's a Series E, so therefore it's not a Nikkor. But paired with that lens, this can actually produce some excellent photos. It came out in 1979, so it's kind of actually it's pre F3. So this is one of Nikon's very first auto exposure cameras, and yet I think they nailed it on the first shot. This thing puts out excellently exposed images. It mounts pretty much any AI lens, and I mean it's tiny as well. You know the size of the pen; it's barely any larger.
Well, that camera when it first was created, it had the unfortunate distinction of being marketed as the camera for women.
For women, yeah.
Yeah, and if you go to Nikon's website, even to this very day, and the history section, they still refer to it that way. And that's not necessarily meant to be derogatory or women can't handle a real camera, but it was smaller. It was more lighter weight. To this day, I mean, even because remember when autofocus came out, cameras actually got larger. You know, when you look at Nikon's F lineup, the F3 was the smallest of their pro cameras because you had the F and F2, which are both pretty big. They were able to advance the camera and shrink it down a little bit down to the F3 size. But then, boom, now all of a sudden you have autofocus, auto film advance, auto everything. And then the F4, F5, and F6 just got bigger again. So the EM, you said, came out in 79, which was kind of that sweet spot of when they were able to start making cameras smaller, but before they had to make them bigger again to start adding all the crap back in. So one of the things I really love about the EM, well, there's two things actually. One is its size. It's very compact. And while I don't think it fits our definition of a point and shoot, I would agree with you. It's a very point and shoot-esque SLR, and that you can shoot it one-handed. You know, you could walk around almost all day with a Series E lens, which was the smaller lens made for it. It's very lightweight. It's very, very portable. You know, hanging around a strap around your neck, it's not gonna weigh too much. But it has one feature that again, was probably meant to make the camera simpler, but I really, really liked, and you just didn't see too much in other SLRs, was that EV compensation button. It's a backlight button. Yeah, so there's a button on the front of the camera. On some versions of the EM, it's silver. On others, it's blue, but it's the same function. And how it works is if you're shooting something with a strong backlight, like someone standing in front of a window, you just press and hold it, and it automatically gives you 2 extra stops of EV, which most SLRs have a dial for that. The problem with a dial, or a menu option, is you have to remember to turn it off. And how many times, even the most advanced photographers mess with an EV setting, and you get 2, 3, 4, 5, a dozen pictures down the line, you're like, shit, I forgot to turn it off. Whereas that's a momentary button. So the second you release it, it just goes back to 0. And I would have liked to have seen a feature like that on more of their cameras.
Standard center weight metering they have installed, like that's always on. I think that's actually so good. I haven't even once had to use this button. It just nails exposure every time. So yes, it's nice to have, but like, wow, the meter they put in this thing is just amazing.
Nikon really, they did call it the women's camera, but they also called them the first camera because they were small enough that they thought they could market them to women to carry in their purses. Of course, Pentax had the ME and Olympus had the OM10. And then a little bit later, Minolta had the XG1, which were all basically very similar camera, just with different lens mounts. But they were all aperture priority only with no manual controls.
Yeah, and I have what I completely suspect to be a rehouse of the EM here. This is the Nikonos 4A. These are kind of uncommon because you usually see the earlier 3s and the later 5s. But this was actually my dad's camera. He was a technical diver back in the 80s, and he bought this new in 1984. If you look at the controls on this, it's exactly the same as that on the EM. All the behavior of this exactly the same as the EM, same flash speed, same shutter, same everything. So I suspect this is actually just a rehouse of the EM, and this is just as point and shootable.
It's not an SLR though, so
no, this is a viewfinder. Yeah,
right.
Which is that's the big difference. This takes the Nikonos mount lens.
They did make a Nikonos SLR. I think it was the RS.
Yep.
Yeah.
The RS.
Very hard to find though. And I have the 4 too. I have a 2 and a 4, both wonderful cameras. It's funny, earlier we were talking about the Aqua Snappy and how good those cameras are above water. And I only use my Nikonos above water. Like to me, like for scuba diving and proper underwater photography, you definitely want a more capable camera. But for family fun with your kids underwater in a pool, I would take the Aqua Snappy any day over the Nikonos. But for a camera that you want to shoot with great images above water, it's a fantastic lens.
Because of course, this is the rangefinder lenses on these.
Not all of them, but the 35 f2.5, which is kind of like the kit lens you find on most of those, is optically identical to the Nikon S rangefinder lens, the 35-2.5. So that's a great lens, incredibly sharp. But to find it on a Nikon rangefinder, Theo, you got your S2 coming for your birthday. If there's one lens beyond the 50 millimeter, I would strongly recommend you look out for. It's that 35 f2.5. Very, very good lens, very sharp, perfect field of view, no distortion. But a cheaper way to experience that same lens is on the Nikonos, the 1 through 4.
Yeah, I have the 2 and the 4, and both of them have the 35 millimeter lens on them.
There you go.
You're right. It is. To be honest, I haven't shot with them, but I do need to try that out.
1 through 3 are pretty neat. The trigger, the shutter release, is actually also the wind. I have one right here.
Right. Yeah, the wind lever is actually the shutter release too, which is funny because the first time you handle that camera, you're like, how do I fire the shutter?
Yeah, here we go. This is my Nikonos 2, also was my father's with the same lens mounted on it. But yeah, it has the shutter lock on the top, and then you press it once to fire, and then you press it again to rewind it. You can actually get a pretty good frame rate on that, but like, why would you want to underwater?
So there's an interesting thing about those Nikonuses. A lot of people don't know. They were very popular with the early models were very popular with war photographers in Vietnam because it rained so much and because they were so durable. But the other thing is the 4s and 5s were used a lot by the military. And you've seen how there's usually like a black, a green, and an orange.
Yeah.
Usually the orange ones are military because they're afraid people will drop them and lose them.
Huh. Well, that's cool.
Yeah, because you would think it would be the green or the black, but it's actually the orange.
Yeah, I have an orange 4 that I use. It's very nice. It has a normal SLR shutter similar to what Tim was saying, like the EM, whereas the 1 through 3, it's kind of like a foil,
Yeah,
like a
it's a
guillotine
guillotine,
almost.
which is why the camera is so tall because it has the shutter housing. It's one lead.
So I was gonna say, we mentioned before, and I'm gonna use a bit of a segue of the backlight option, and there is a few compacts that did come out with a backlight. I've got the PC35 AF
Yeah, that's a good
from
one.
Pentax here. This is a really nice. I've got the battery grip on
You
here
got
at the moment.
You have the
But
motor wind.
yeah, the motor wind on there at the moment. I usually take it off, to be honest. I find the motor wind to be annoying, but it is a brilliant little compact camera. It does everything automatically, and it has a backlight compensation button on the top, which
There you go.
I think is a fantastic feature.
Yeah, it really is. Because you're more, in my opinion, for general purpose photography, you're going to use a backlight way more often than the opposite of that. So
Yeah.
you're going to want that +2 way more often than any other setting that a dial would offer. So we're gonna do one round of guess that camera. I have a point and shoot in my hand. We haven't talked about it yet, but all you get to do is hear it. You guys ready for this? You're gonna love it. Can you guys hear that? Did it come through?
Oh, Mike. Yeah, you could have done better than that.
The Minolta Talker. It does, I think, 3 things. It does load film. It mentions something about the flash.
Use flash. Too dark. Use flash.
Too dark. Use flash. Yeah. So the problem is I don't have film in it. So I have to get film in it to be able to hear any of the other modes. But once again, I keep promoting my site, but I have a review of this, and I was able to get an audio recording of all 3 things that it says. But wasn't it you, Theo, that found out it was like the daughter of the Minolta distributor?
No, Paul mentioned that actually.
Yeah, it was. I read it somewhere just within the last week or so, and I can't find where I found it. But
I think I saw it on
the
Facebook.
voice. It was on Facebook.
I think it was on Facebook.
It was for sure. I just can't figure out where it was exactly. But it was the daughter of one of the marketing executive woman who had her daughter voiced the words that it said.
It's so distorted though. It's like I remember the old Atari pole position arcade cabinet where before every race it'd be prepare to qualify. You know, I don't know what technology was used in the 80s for voice synthesis, but this is marginally better. I mean, some of the times you have to really listen to what it's saying, and it's not helpful at all. It's truly a gimmick.
So are there different like language versions of that and like Japanese and Spanish and stuff?
Yeah, so there was a Japanese version, and supposedly there's some so there is a switch to just turn the voice off. So you can see on the back door, mine has an on off. So if I turn it off, the voice just shuts up. But supposedly there was a Japanese version that had a 3rd position that would alternate between English and Japanese. And then I've read that they say that some of the English only ones like mine, even though it shows a 2-position switch, there is like an in between, some way to move the switch halfway between on and off, and it'll start talking to you in Japanese. I don't know if that's an urban legend or maybe just some of them did it, but this one clearly does not, because I've tried it a number of times to see if I get it to speak Japanese, and I've never been successful at it. But this was a neat camera. It was based off of in the US, it was actually called just the Minolta AFSV. There were some versions of it where it was called the Talker, and they did call it the Talker in some of their marketing materials. But if you're looking to get one of these cameras, a good tip on eBay is to just search for ASFV. The V means voice. So sometimes you'll find, because a lot of the eBay sellers know the Minolta Talker is desirable, so they jack up the prices for them. But sometimes, and that's how I got this one, I actually just searched for Minolta AFS, and I found a bunch of them for way cheaper. And then I just started looking at the pictures. And if you see the letter V, it's on both the front and the top plate. If you see that V, that is the Talker then. So it might be a way, if for whatever reason you really want to get one of these cameras, to get it for a lot cheaper than just, eBay searching Minolta Talker. But similar to Canon, like we were saying before too, with the Del Sol, they added a gimmicky feature to what's otherwise a pretty good point and shoot, and that's the same that applies to this too. Turn off the voice, leave it on, whatever, but the images I got from this were really quite good.
If you combine the two, you can have a Canon which starts telling you that it's getting too hot. when it's sitting in the sun.
Too hot. Go inside.
Hey, if you get a talker that doesn't talk, clean the contacts that are on the back. They're on the back door. When you open the camera up, are I think 3 or 4 little gold pins, and those pins get corrosion on them, and that's what connects the battery or the on-off switch.
Okay.
And if you get one that doesn't talk, just take a cotton swab and some alcohol and clean those pins. It'll solve the problem. The one I have right now, when I first got it, it didn't work.
Yeah, because the speaker is in the door.
Yes.
And it's even got like a quick load, this little flap, like Canon did a lot too, where all you do is just extend the leader to a certain point, close that, and then you just it does everything for you. So it's really a quite nice camera. I mean, it actually has, but I do know they made some auxiliary close-up lens attachments for it. I was going to say it has a filter ring, but it does not. It supports up to ASA 1000, which some of the earlier 80s point and shoots did not either. Built-in flash, stuff like that too. So, fun little camera. And if you want to hear the daughter of some fictitious Minolta marketing guy's daughter talking to you, too dark, use flash. It's a fun gimmick. If we're going to stay on Minolta, one other kind of gimmicky model, Paul, you've talked about this before too.
Oh, yeah.
The Freedom Vista. This one also is called the Peas. This was a panoramic point and shoot, but unlike many 35 millimeters that had an adjustable panoramic mode that you could turn on and off, this one, you can't not be panoramic. It's only panoramic only. So when you look at the film gate, it only exposes the middle section of normal 35 millimeter film, which you might think, what's the big deal? I could just crop it. But one thing that this camera does, which most of the adjustable cameras doesn't, is the viewfinder is natively panoramic.
What's the focal length?
I think it's 24 millimeters.
Right. So it's wider angle than because most would have been 35 to 38.
Right. This is a 24.
You have a true panorama.
How does it compare to the AF600?
That's an adjustable one though. So
that's
that
adjustable.
Native,
okay.
That's it. To my knowledge, and I could be wrong, but to my knowledge, this is the only point and shoot that was panoramic only.
No, Fuji has one too, the Cartier. It was Japan only, and I have one that was from Kurt stuff.
Oh, really? Okay. But the thing that is nice, and Johnny Sisson was a huge fan of this camera too, and I agree with his assessment that it's less exciting to shoot a camera that has a normal viewfinder and just mask off the top and bottom, as opposed to a viewfinder that's just natively panoramic. Like somehow in my mind, it allows me to see panoramic better if I'm seeing a true panoramic image in the viewfinder that's taking up the entire viewfinder. So when I look through this, I mean, I am seeing a true panoramic image that's the same height as if this was a normal point and shoot, but much wider. So I feel like even though the end result is still just like a cropped 35 millimeter frame, it allows me to compose and see the panoramic image while shooting it, I think, a little bit better than some of those adjustable ones are. Like Theo, you mentioned the AF600.
Did the AF600 did it have a removable panorama adapter?
No, it's just one of those where there's a switch and there's a mask. We mentioned Nikons, and I can't not talk about premium Nikon point and shoots without the TI series. So there was the 3.5 Ti and the 2.8 Ti, Ti meaning titanium. These are fairly decent point and shoot cameras, metal body. It's just a 35 millimeter Nikkor f2.8 lens. Certainly good, but I don't think it's really any better than other point and shoots. But the biggest gimmick though is this huge analog needle display on top that displays the focus distance, so I can actually see what it's detecting. Although, who wants to have an autofocus camera that you focus and then you pull it away from your eye to look at the needle to see? I mean, it's completely useless.
I was going to say, it's not completely useless because it was actually, I used it for street, which was really great to just shoot from hip level.
Oh, from the hip? Okay.
Use that to see what if it's hitting something that I'm aiming at.
It would tell you, like, if you agreed with, oh yeah, that person is about 5 feet away, and like, all right, I'll give you that.
I suppose for the 28, especially, that would work well because shooting from the hip with a 28.
So this is the 35. So it's a 35 millimeter, but there was a black version called the 2.8 Ti, which I have somewhere around here. I just don't have it handy. I actually like the look of the champagne model better, which is the 335. The 28 is only black, but they do have a fairly, I mean, it feels nice and heavy. It's a metal body, great lens. The viewfinder is cool because this is one of the very few point and shoots I've ever used where there's a 7-segment LED in the display that will tell you like what exposure setting it's using. You can see the shutter speed, which is kind of cool, like you would expect to see on an SLR. So it does have some premium features. It has a mode dial here on the top, which allows you to go through the various menu options while using the digital display. There is a very, very tiny digital LED in the bottom right-hand corner that just tells you when it's off and how many exposures you have left if you need to see it digitally as well. But very impractical. At least today, these things go for a little bit too much money. And then, of course, it does have a sliding panorama switch on it for any reason you'd want to do that.
You know, the other thing, Mike, the problem that you're run into today on the premium digitals, the premium point and shoots. Here's a Leica Mini Lux,
okay,
which is a 40 millimeter 2.4 lens. It has program mode, it has aperture priority, it has manual focus, and they're all beginning to fail.
Yeah,
the circuits on them are failing. This one actually works, but the lens turns off, it retracts. The little door doesn't close.
Shut.
The same thing is true of those 28 and 35 TIs. The circuits in them are beginning to fail. It was just a problem that it wasn't just Nikon, though they are now having the problem on the FAs and F3s also with the LCDs.
Wasn't it the type of solder they used at that time in an effort to be more environmentally conscious? They were using a less caustic, I don't know the name of it, but
they did change the materials, but you know,
yeah, but over time the solder joints disintegrate.
Yeah, and the circuit boards would fail, and there just aren't any parts for them. So if you buy a 35 Ti and a 28 Ti, you really have to be very careful. I mean, even if you bought one that's in perfect working order, like that Mini Lux, I mean, it's just a terrific camera, but you know, it's going to fail. It's going to fail at some point.
I know a lot of people have a lot of disposable money. There's plenty of good cameras you could buy for that amount of money, but I would not recommend it.
Kyle, do you have any experience with either of those at 20?
Yeah, I bought two 35 Ti's and they both died, but I found someone that can fix them. So yeah, I got them fixed for like what, $200 each.
Was it in the US or was it in China?
No, it's in they're based in China, so I found someone that.
Was that recently or was that a long time ago?
Yeah, recently, like last year.
Okay.
As I understand, there are people in China who are actually repairing the X-Pans also.
They're like very skillful repairmen, so yeah.
Now, are they able to just resolder the joints or are they remanufacturing some of the parts?
No, they just resolder the joints and just the electronic boards for you, okay, I guess.
So it's an option. It's just still not a good one, though.
Yeah, you have to ship them to China, and shipping is kind of, just pray for them to arrive safely.
Well, I can vouch for Phototech in Poland for the Fujifilm GA45 645ZI that we were talking about earlier. Mine ultimately had the display on the little LCD display on the back go bad, which meant that you can't set the ISO. Fortunately, I had written down all the clicks so I could do it without seeing, but it was pretty annoying because the dials can get bumped and the settings can get off. But I found their video on YouTube showing them doing the repair. They use the existing LCD that you have. They just replace the board. They resolder a new little board behind it. They do it in basically the same day they get it and return it back. And so, unfortunately, my camera got lost in Polish mail for about 3 months. But when it finally did land, they basically had it back to me within a week.
Look, we've talked about a few famous lineups of compacts and point and shoots. There's a couple that we probably haven't touched on. Well, is the Pentax SPO range. They were everywhere. You can't really go to a camera, bin and not trip over a whole bunch of them. But they're fantastic value for what you get. for what you pay for these days. I mean, you can pick them up for like 10, 20, $30, and they're great. Some of them are going up in value a little bit. You'll pay $100 or $200 for them. But the SPOs are.
Is there a specific one that you'd recommend?
Look, they're all pretty much a bit of a muchness.
Okay.
They're good. I mean, they're good. It's like getting one of those Canon short shots, I'd say. It's just, they just do exactly what they say they're going to do. And the other range is the Mu range, which has obviously become a bit of a premium type range of compacts these days from Olympus. Even the Zoom ones, they seem to have more problems though than what some of the cheaper ones do. Like the Muse are quite famous for the seals around the lens going, and you end up with I think it's called the ring of death or the ring of light leakage, so to speak. So, but they tend to have those kind of problems, and obviously the fixed lens Muse are up there in terms of desirability these days.
Yeah, I think the Pentax zoom compact cameras, like they're all pretty good. Like the Canon ones, they're all pretty good. I just find them a little bit bland, a little bit boring. I mean, they take fine pictures, but there's nothing like with the Canon sure shot line. You had all these quirky, weird stuff like the waterproof one and the one with the soft focus filter. The Pentax ones are good. My first camera was a Pentax one, but I just find them a bit bland. They're probably the premium Pentax point and shoot was the SBO Mini. And I actually did a video comparing on my YouTube channel, Matt Loves Cameras, doing a comparison between the Pentax SBO Mini and the Sure Shot Sleek, the Canon Sure Shot Sleek. And they're both fine little cameras. They're just, I don't know, there's just nothing totally exciting or incredible about them, if you know what I mean.
They just do what's on the box, what it says on the box. They take pictures and convenient. But they're good value for anyone trying to get into using a compact camera. I don't want to make it sound like, we talked a few premium ones here and they can be worth a bit. If someone's just wanting to dip their toe into film photography and without really risking too much of an outlay, the SBOs are a great option.
Yeah, and they're common. I agree with you. You find them at Goodwills, you find them in boot sales, garage sales. They're not that hard to find.
Yep, Canon and Pentax really good.
Ricoh had a number of really nice little cameras. The FF90 series was a very nice camera.
What's cool about the FF90, speaking to like how Canon had some quirky things, the FF90 has a monstrous LCD on the top plate, which it doesn't make the camera better. It's just cool. Whenever I hear about a point and shoot that I am not familiar with, I'll usually Google it and I try to find there's got to be something different about it that would make me want to get it. But there were so many of those cameras from that era that make fine pictures, but they're just boring. And as a collector / shooter, I like to try to get ones that at least have something interesting. On the Facebook page, Brian McDummel, who's been on the show before, mentioned the Shinnon Auto 3001 as a camera he loves. And I feel like we might have mentioned that model on a previous episode, but I can't remember why that camera is special. But then I went on eBay to see how much they cost, and they're selling for $300 to $400. So does anybody know what's special about the Shinnon Auto 3001?
It was the autofocus system, I think.
Okay.
That's an odd one, isn't it? I mean, it's a strange shape.
It looked different. It's very thin, very slim. Yeah, he talked about it briefly on the Facebook page in our show announcement, and it looks cool, but I couldn't believe the prices they were going for because I couldn't figure out what was special about them.
Shinnon had a lot of patents for autofocus, and I can't remember what it was. We did talk about that camera.
We did. He said it was on the strap episode.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll have to go back and listen to my own show to remember what it was he said. But he said he wanted to join the show, Brian McDummel. But that was his pick as his recommended point and shoot. And since it's a Shinnon, one tiny segue into a model that I recommended about a week or two ago to someone on the Discord server was the Kodak, the VR, the K14. This is the K14, the K12, and the K10. And this is a very ugly camera. It has this huge flip up flash for good red eye reduction. You can tell it's a Shinnon because it has the bug eye auto exposure system that all the Shinnons had. But I've shot this camera a couple times and very good shots. The auto exposure system worked perfectly. The autofocus system got the shots I wanted. Image quality from these cameras are really, really nice. And two more pluses for them is that they sell for dirt cheap. Like I mentioned it to someone on Discord, and like literally like the first result on eBay was one for like $9. So this is if you could deal with an ugly camera, this produces wildly beautiful shots. But from a quirky, weird standpoint, another cool feature of this camera was that it was designed for a proprietary Kodak lithium battery pack, which you might be thinking, gee, Mike, why is that good? I'm sure you can't get that battery anymore. And that's true. However, Kodak thought of that, and they also made it work with a 9-volt battery. So you can, in the same battery compartment where the proprietary lithium battery goes, you can insert a straight, normal, run-of-the-mill Rayovac 9-volt battery straight out of a smoke detector, and this camera works fine on that. So to my knowledge, I think this might be the only film camera that ever works off of a 9-volt battery.
Just on that camera, Mike, I've got a question on that camera. When you flipped up that front piece, you can see through the bit that's holding the flash up. Is that for any particular reason?
No, I think it's just there so you can see the lens.
Oh, okay.
But cool. That is effectively the power switch though. So you can, it's like a tinted piece of plastic. You can't shoot through it. I'm assuming that's what your question was.
Yeah.
But yeah, so if you look at a picture of it, the flash flips up, it's top hinged. It sticks up, I'd say a good 2.5, almost 3 inches above the lens, which for a point and shoot is much higher than they typically go. So that would mean that this would be pretty effective at reducing red eye without having to, have all those extra flashes like some cameras did. The flip up hinge is the power button for the camera. So flip down, it's off. Flip it up, it's working. This is called the K14 Medalist. The K12 is the exact same camera with only 2 differences. One is the lack of a date back, and the other one is that it lacks, I think, a fill flash mode, or maybe it's a flash off mode or something with the flash that's only available on the K14 that the K12 does not have. But otherwise, they're the same camera, same lens, same metering system, same focus system, same goofy pop-up lens, same $10 to $20 price tag on eBay.
Are you noticing a longer life of those batteries, that 9-volt?
I haven't shot it enough times to really give you an idea of how long it would last, but I would suspect, considering 9-volt batteries by their very nature are designed to last a while, I would suspect you probably do get pretty good shelf life out of them.
I just looked them up on eBay just to see, and they're going for really low, nice prices. Problem is they're all in the US and they're like $60 to get it delivered out to Australia, and there's no way I'm paying that.
Well, Kodak had a whole series of VR 35 cameras. This was the high-end model, but all the VRs coincided with the release of Kodacolor VR film, which was, Paul, 85?
Right. Yep.
Yeah, so they wanted to release a new type of basically Kodak Gold, but then along with it, they released a new VR series of cameras, which really it would have worked in any camera, but of course they wanted to have new models. And by that point, Eastman Kodak was no longer making cameras in the United States, so they outsourced it to Shinon. Shinon made that camera for them. So if you could find one, Theo, ever one day it pops up your way, definitely give it a shot. I mean, it's an ugly duckling for sure. It's on the par with your Nikon L35 AF, the Canon auto shots. You're going to get really great pictures from it, and a large, bulky, awkward camera. The last one, well, I did have a few more, but I'll try and go quickly. But one style of point and shoot cameras, which we didn't cover at all, were disposables. So disposable cameras were very, very common. You can still get them now. You can go to Walgreens and actually still buy a disposable camera. In fact, that's still the type of camera people will get when they want an underwater camera. They make the Kodak Splash or something like that. That's a very common use for modern day disposable cameras. But, everybody thinks of the disposable cameras from the 80s, 90s, and 2000s. But this one right here is called a Technipack 1. And it says it's made by Technicolor. It's never been opened before, but it comes in this black and blue, all plastic body. It's incredibly cheap. But this was a very early version of a disposable film camera, 35 millimeter. It says that it has 20 exposures. So that's, before 24 exposures. So this thing's from at least the 70s. But it very clearly says that after completing a roll, you must send it back to the manufacturer to be developed. It says it uses emulsion X1, which who knows what that is. If I had to guess, this probably is using some type of cinema film. What was that lab in Seattle that sold all their own film, but it was actually just
Seattle Film Works.
Yeah, Seattle Film Works.
5247.
Yeah, so I'm gonna guess that whatever film is in the Technipack 1 by Technicolor is probably a similar concept to that, but it comes in this red, white, and blue box that I have. You slide it open. It actually has the address printed already on the box. You just put like 2 stamps on it, stick the camera in, drop it in the mail, and you push the button and they do the rest.
But also lately, even currently, as a retailer, before all of the kerfuffle with the film cameras and film coming back during the pandemic and all that stuff, we've always had an end dial. I've been with my retailer or I should say my employer for almost 10 years now, and we've always had an end dial of disposable film cameras, and constantly, like, we never really, I mean, it tapered off, yes, but
it never stopped.
It was constant. It wasn't every single day, but
it never hit zero.
Exactly. I mean, we still have, and now evidently now we have even more now because Harman's into the disposable cameras. Fuji, we've always carried the Fuji line, the waterproof ones.
I'm not sure if anyone's got one of these. They're a Sunny Life underwater camera, focus free, 28mm, still in the box.
I like the box. It's like pink and yellow.
I know. I actually can't bring myself to open it to use it.
Well, I had a camera I got from Kurt. Paul, you talked about weird cameras. I know you got one. It was the cat camera. I unfortunately found someone who was willing to buy it off of me, so I ended up selling it without opening it. I had done a Google Voice Translate, or I use my phone at least. I took a picture because it's all written in Japanese, and it said makes cat sounds. So while I never got a chance to try it, I feel like it was like a Minolta talker. You press the shutter release and maybe it would meow or something like that.
Yeah, I've still got it. I can't figure out.
Open it up. Come on.
One of those things I can't open it. I mean,
I couldn't either, but
no, it's like an oatmeal can around.
Yeah, it's a big can, like each pop can with
a pull tab on the top.
Pull tab on top of it, but it's written entirely in Japanese. It's made by Holga.
I've seen those.
Yeah, I had one. I sold it on eBay, and Paul had the other one. Why he had 2, I don't know.
But Paul, I've got a couple of compacts that I know you're very fond of.
Oh,
I specifically put them out. The Mamiya U.
Oh yeah, the Mamiya U.
Yes, with the new fixed button on it.
Well, I just sent one of those. I put one in the mail today to Anthony. And he's going to have to get in touch with Bill Rogers and fix that.
Which is what I did, and it was so easy. Pull the top off, and you just slot in the new membrane. And I've got the autofocus version, which is more of a point and shoot.
But do you have the Handy Sam?
No, I do not.
I happen to have a Handy Sam, unused, sealed in the box.
And for anybody who doesn't know what that is, it's literally a cradle that you put the camera in. And according to Marcy Merrill, it was designed for selfies. So like you would cradle the camera in a selfie, and you could kind of angle it up, down, sort of any direction you want. So if you had a table and you wanted to do a selfie instead of a tripod, you would put the camera in the hand Sam, set the delayed action timer, and take a step back, and you could get a picture of yourself without having to worry about a tripod or somebody holding it.
Well, if it's up for sale, Paul, we might have to talk.
Well, he just had a birthday.
Well, I happen to have a Mamiya magazine camera that has Theo's name on it that I got to get shipped out. So maybe I'll just stick the Handy Sam in the box with the magazine.
Oh wow, special.
So we're running short on time here. We did lose Mark Faulkner. We did lose somebody else. Kyle Liu, we had mentioned quickly on the Facebook page. I joked about the Raleigh QZ. That's a very expensive high-end camera with a super fast shutter speed. There's so many others to go over. We barely scratched the surface of all the different models out there. I had thought if we had time, we could talk about the Ramera, which is a Kowa camera that's also a radio. that came out in the 60s. There's just so many cameras we could make tons of episodes about, but I feel like we covered a nice range of high-end cameras, some bizarro cameras, and some pretty common cameras that are affordable. This is a great segment to get into if you're interested in film photography. We talked about the Olympus IS series, which is basically a point and shoot SLR with a fixed lens. Tim volunteered the Nikon EM, which is a somewhat point and shoot SLR with a very compact body that uses the Nikon F mount, so you still have access to all their lenses. Rafael's holding up the Yashica Samurai, which is another point and shoot. It's a half frame camera, but it is a true SLR. We mentioned that one in the half frame episode, and I'm not a fan of the ergonomics of it. I find having to grip it while shooting it, it very easily could slip out of your hands and fall to the ground and explode. But there's a ton of options in this segment that are worth checking out. And there's really no wrong answer when it goes to trying some of these, because if you're new to this hobby, it can be intimidating sometimes hearing about all the Leicas and all the high-end Nikon rangefinders and all these ridiculously expensive cameras. But there's absolutely nothing wrong with an Olympus Mu or a Pentax SBO or a Canon auto shot or any other number ones that are out there, because we all have them and I've used them. And truth be told, a nicely exposed image from a Nikon or Canon or Fuji or Ricoh point and shoot, once you print it out, most people aren't going to know the difference between that and something shot through an SLR. It's more about the flexibility and capabilities that the camera has. But before we go, does anybody else have any last comments or things they want to share?
I have one last one, and I forgot I had this until just now because it always hangs up by my door as a emergency camera. Don't drop it. The Belomo Orion EE. Do not buy one. Do not buy one. This is the Soviet Union's idea of a point and shoot. It's completely automatic exposure, but there is a manual override. It's shutter priority, and the lens on this, I mean, it's a triplet. But now this came out in the 70s. And due to my testing, I have determined that this lens is not rectilinear. That is correct. Something they figured out 110 years before this came out. This camera has that issue. So don't buy one of these. Stay away from any of these. And the meters always go bad on them. So
before he left, Mark Faulkner nominated the Horizon Compact as a Soviet point and shoot. So take for that with what you will. That is one I have not come across.
Tim, thanks to you from the last episode, I'm looking for the Nikkor 35 millimeter now.
There you go. The F2. It's a great lens.
Yeah, enjoy it. It's good.
Can't wait.
I think the only thing I would add is if you're going to buy a point and shoot like a cheapy Nikon or something like that, do it for the form factor, and because you want that compactness. Because if you want a higher quality image, and it's really debatable whether it's a higher quality image, you can go get an N55 SLR with a kit lens for under $20 and shoot a Nikon SLR image. So do it for the form factor. That's what you're paying for still.
Pick what you like. Don't, I mean, as much as I write reviews and most of the people here talk about what they like, if there's something you enjoy and it's what you want to shoot, by all means, go for it. There's no wrong way to shoot film.
Believe it or not, this H35 is on my belt every single day. I never leave home without it. And I do forget sometimes my camera bag.
Because of Mike, this is on my belt every day.
It's got an AGAT 18. Yeah. Wonderful cameras. Great lens. All right, today's December 11th. As usual, it's going to take us a couple of days to get this out. Real quick plug, tomorrow will be the 9th anniversary of MikeEckman.com. 9 years ago tomorrow, I wrote my first review. My site was originally just meant to be a personal blog. I had no idea it would expand the way it was. Had it not, I would have never met any of you guys. This podcast would not have existed. It blows my mind that I've been doing this for 9 years. So maybe I'll have to think of something special for next year when I hit 10 years. But this will also be the last normal episode of the year. Obviously, Christmas and New Year's and other holidays are coming up soon. We're hoping Paul, Theo, Anthony, and I to have something special between now and the end of the year, but it will not be a normal episode. So stay tuned to the Facebook group, the Discord group, my website, where all the typical announcements are posted. Do we post them on Instagram, Theo?
We do. Anthony posts it.
So Instagram, we just made a Flickr page. So this is our last normal episode of the year. I want to thank you guys for coming on the show once again. Tim Peters, it's great to see you back. AJ again. Rafael, thanks for coming for the first time. Kyle Liu has popped up a couple times and shared some interesting tidbits. Andrew, it's always great to see you. We did lose Matt. We did lose Mark, like I mentioned before too. But as always, the topics and discussions on the Camerosity podcast are influenced by you guys. We look forward to seeing you guys next time, and everybody have a safe and happy holiday season. Bye, everyone.
Good night.
Merry Christmas, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
I'm with the remarkable new Minolta Talker. When the light's too dim, it talks to you.
Too dark. Use flash.
When you're out of flash range, it tells you.
Check distance.
And when the camera's empty,
Load film.
it's the auto exposure, auto focus 35mm camera that loads, advances, and rewinds the film all automatically. The new Minolta Talker talks you into good pictures.
Great pictures.
Only from the mind of Minolta.
Too dark. Use flash. I said too dark. Use flash. Great pictures. Do I really have to work with these idiots?